Thanks, Rabbi Mark, and thanks, Rachel. Always great to be here. So many friends, old friends and new friends. Let's see if I can see the gallery view. Great. Always nicer to see the faces in the boxes. Hi, everyone. So we learn, our ancient sages say that we start asking about the laws of Pesach, Passover, 30 days before the festival, which is funny because it comes out that that's Purim. So on Purim itself, our sages are telling us to actually start getting curious about Pesach. And there's a lot of deep spiritual connections between the two. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov most famously said that Pesach used to be the beginning, which is a fair claim because the Torah itself seems to make it pretty clear that Passover is the beginning. It's in the month of Nisan, which the Torah says is the first month. But Rabbi Nachman said Pesach used to be the beginning, but now Purim is. Like Purim usurped Pesach, you could say, as the real beginning. And one way we can understand it is that if we want to ride the wave that our mystics say is coming, the wave of Pesach is a wave of liberation, a wave of chesed, of loving kindness, of loving oneness. And if we want to ride that wave, it makes sense that we need to attune ourselves and align ourselves to it in advance. That way, we're going to be able to ride it that much better. So, in that spirit, I'm going to share an intention for our practice today, getting us ready for Pesach. Some of you may know that one of the beautiful rituals we do before Pesach, immediately before Pesach, is we look for chametz. What is chametz? Chametz is leaven, mostly things like bread, in other words, that we don't eat and we don't want to have around so much over Pesach. And this beautiful ritual involves going through the home, and traditionally it's done with a candle and a feather or something like that, and finding all the little crumbs that hopefully are not there anymore because we've cleaned them by then. But if they are there, this is our chance to find them. And there's a fascinating discussion. Actually, first of all, I just want to talk for one, I think it's worth half a minute, talking about what is this thing about getting rid of chametz. Um, Chametz ultimately is great. Chametz is essential. Leaven is essential for making bread. And bread is clearly the cornerstone of the ancient Israelite diet in the Torah and central to ancient Israelite agriculture and society. Bread is wonderful. In fact, Pesach culminates in another festival called Shavuot, 7 weeks after Pesach, when we celebrate receiving the Torah on Shavuot, which is all about bread. Bread is a major theme of Shavuot, both in the sacrifices of the day and also in the story we tell, the story of Ruth, which is very beautiful and takes place in a place called the House of Bread, Bethlehem. So bread is great. There's nothing wrong with chametz. There's nothing wrong with leaven. But our calendar and the Torah are telling us that once a year, there's a wisdom in starting over again without it, and beginning again with just the very simple, flat, plain bread called matzah, which is not risen, which has no leaven in it, which is completely flat, completely simple. In fact, real real matzah is just flour and water, nothing else at all. So it's really the epitome of the simplicity. And our mystics tell us that what matzah is lacking is unhealthy egotism, unhealthy pride. And unhealthy egotism and pride, by the way, can also manifest, Baal Shem Tov and others talk about this, as low self-esteem, as insecurity, as inner criticism. But it's not only a matter of feeling so good about ourselves in an overt way, but also if we actually are judging ourselves harshly, holding ourselves to a standard that we shouldn't, judging ourselves unfavorably, that's also a form of unhealthy egotism, according to our mystics. Because they're pointing out that it also involves a kind of unhealthy attachment to a certain story or version of ourselves, who we think we should be, right? Instead of just being with what is. So that's a little about chametz and a little about what we're going to do with it. And now for the specific intention, there's a discussion in the Talmud. The sages say, what if someone is looking for their chametz, doing this ritual the night before Seder night, and they're looking for their chametz with a big flaming torch? Is that okay? Does that work? And you might think, by the way, when I say torch, I mean like a flaming torch as opposed to an electric torch, right? I think that's clear, right? A flaming torch, you might think that's great because it gives us a lot of light. The rabbis say it's no good. And one of the reasons they say it's no good is we want to be able to look for our chametz in the tiny little holes and cracks. And for that, they say you really need a small little candle. So that's the discussion in the Talmud. So when I came across that, really made me think about the work we do in our practice when we are constantly coming across things that we want to work with in various ways, right? We're constantly, thoughts and emotions are coming up. And if we have a little bit of Yishuv Hadat, a little bit of a settled consciousness, then we know that there's an opportunity there to work with these things. So the big flaming torch for me represents gevura, which is severity, or another name for gevura, din, judgment, right? If when something comes up that's not so easy in my practice, a thought or an emotion, I'm approaching it with judgment, with severity, with this big flaming torch. My experience is that that actually isn't very helpful, doesn't actually lead to healing and integration so much as it just creates more tension and more things that I'll need to look at and work on. But if I can look at it with a little candle, and for me here, that this little candle is representing rachamim, it's representing compassion, that if I can look at it with this steady light of compassion, I can do great work with whatever comes up. First of all, I can just be with it, which is, the name of the game, right? That's our main intention, just to be able to just be present with it. I can hold it with care. The candle can represent the light with which I want to see it clearly, as opposed to, by the way, the sages also say that the torch is no good because the light is not steady and it's flickering and creates shadows, but doesn't actually let you see clearly like a candle. So if we can just see things clearly with this candle, and this candle is not judging, banishing, telling a story about how anything needs to be, but just really trying to hold it as it is, but with compassion. And compassion just in the very basic sense of accepting the human condition, accepting that we are a human being and it's hard to be a human being, and here we are doing our best. Just that very, very basic universal truth of what we're here to try to do. So that's the intention. Let's move into silence, into focusing on ourselves, and I'll remind us of it and guide us into it as we do. So make yourself comfortable, find a posture that works for you, where you can be balanced between relaxation and alertness. As we bring our attention inside ourselves, you might want to find an anchor. That's an object that we can focus on, that is safe for us to do so. So maybe a part of your body that's safe to focus on, doesn't create too much pain or resistance. Maybe something else like your breath or a mantra, whatever works for you. Let's just be with our anchor and keep coming back to it when we need to for a minute. And throughout the sit, as we may notice sensations or emotions or thoughts, whatever else may arise, let's see if we can bring this small, steady, reliable, compassionate candle, this light that can allow us to be with whatever's going on with presence and with this compassionate acceptance. There's nothing wrong with chametz. We need it to make bread, and that's fine. But right now, we just want to be able to see things clearly and do whatever needs to be done with it. So let's sit in silence with that intention, bringing this compassionate candle to bear on whatever we notice arising. And let's gradually bring this round of practice to a close in your own time. Nice and gentle, come back, let your body do whatever it feels moved to do. And I'll hand it back to Rabbi Mark. It's Rabbi Mark.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Daniel. As always, a beautiful practice today. Let's seal the practice with an opportunity for those who are in mourning, observing yard sites, or for whom the custom is to join in the mourner's Kaddish. You're invited to do so. Thanks to Rachel for sharing the words on the screen. You can put the name or names of those you're honoring in the chat now or afterwards. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, we ask that you please stay present to take a moment to support those who are in mourning right now. And if you are reciting Kaddish, please join me.
Yeah, what's up?
Rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time.
Oh, what was the name of that?
Buchdahl, Yekadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yama, Dibrach, Yute, Yamichma, Fute, Hayechon, Hayed, Israel, Adama, Bisman, Ru, Shmei Rabbah, Navarach, Lame, Amaya, Yiparach, Ar, Adar, V'Yitalev, Val, Shmei, Elam, Mikol, V'Chata, V'Nechemata, Amiran, Ba'alma,
Shlama Rabba
Ishlama Rabba Min Shemaya,
Kol Yisrael
V'Ru,
Oseh Shalom
B'Ramav,
Oseh Shalom
Aleinu v'yakol
Israel,
Ru
Name the place. If they can't go to Genesis closest to me, otherwise I have to go to Parker.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. And I want to thank Rachel Hugood for holding our tech space as always so beautifully, and our teacher, Rabbi Daniel Raphael Silverstein of Applied Jewish Spirituality. Maybe we can put back in the chat, Rachel, the link to Applied Jewish Spirituality's website. Saw somebody earlier just before you started, Daniel, saying AJS rocks. It does. Sign up to be on their mailing list. And if you're leaving us now, I hope you'll join us tomorrow. Cantor Kareth Spencer Shapiro will be leading us in practice. As I mentioned, Yiska Smith will lead us on Thursday, and Friday we'll sit into Shabbat with Marita Anderson. So looking forward to our practice throughout this week. If you have a question for Rabbi Daniel, please put it in the chat. Preface it by writing question while in caps. And if you would like, you don't have to ask a question. You could just share a reflection on your experience with today's teaching and practice, and always wonderful resources and perceptions shared in the chat. And I see some nice kudos as well for AJS there too. Daniel, thank you so much. I will admit I had a little bit of pre-Pesach panic when you started talking about Bidikat Chametz. I thought about, oh God, it's time to shop, time to start cleaning. But thank you for that reminder. It's good. It's helpful for me. But more seriously about that particular custom, which some people may be familiar with, Bidikat Chametz, the search for Chametz the night before Pesach, and some people may not be. But I really was taken, by the teaching about that it's necessary to do it with a small light, with a candle, right? Which is often likened to the soul or to the spirit of God, right? Nishmat, the neshama. And I was thinking about, you really can't do Bidikat Chametz with like a big, a lantern, or like just, why don't you just turn on all the lights? Then it'll be easy to find it, right? It requires some effort. And for me, in terms of the relationship with meditation or thinking about practice itself as a kind of Bidikat Chametz, which is basically what you were suggesting, right? We're sitting here, we're looking for our Chametz. So the first part of that, I want to get to the Chametz part. that you were talking about. But first, just the question about effort, requiring some effort. Um, by thinking about using the candlelight rather than having the illusion of, wow, it's just obvious, it's just easy to see. We have to look for it, have to put effort into looking for it. So I want to invite you to maybe talk a little bit, maybe if you're comfortable talking about like what happens with you while you're practicing, like what you're looking for with that little candle. Um, and since it is effortful, it's easy to like put the candle down or start thinking about Passover cleaning or shopping or whatever, right? Making a list, and then coming back to the candle and looking, right? So what do you think about that question about the effort that's required? That this is a practice that involves effort. So let's start there.
Thanks, Rabbi Mark. So what's coming up for me is what I heard in the Buddhist meditation world called right effort, which is this idea that we do, of course, we do need to show up both physically, like I need to, make the time and be here doing it, but I also need to show up internally, as you say, with the intention and the diligence to practice, as opposed to just thinking about my to-do list or my shopping list or whatever the millions of things that I could think about. And it's relevant to that word I use, rachamim, compassion, because we all know the kind of effort that isn't compassionate, that's maybe more on the side of judgment or gevura that I mentioned, the flaming torch being like an analogy for that, that we can motivate ourselves in a way that isn't kind, and that
Mm-hmm.
actually doesn't help us in the practice. So I find, you asked me to talk about myself, I find with myself, there's been like a learning over the years of how to motivate myself to keep practicing. And this is not just about the practice, right? This is about like what goes on throughout our lives. The practice is just like a microcosm of life. So learning how to motivate myself in a way that gets the job done, but that also doesn't create more hurt, doesn't create more stuff I'm going to have to work on later by kind of like forcing myself to do it, suppressing something else, but instead is compassionate, in the sense of accepting whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that might look like taking on, I've got like an inner persona of a teacher or a guide or a healer, which is
Mm-hmm.
saying, you can do this. It's okay. And if something else comes up that really needs to be looked at right there and then
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's fine too. But if that's happening all the time, then I'm never going to practice, right? So there's that, trying to find that balance.
Right. I love that. I love that. I mean, I'm just very taken with basically this candle of rachamim, of compassion, of looking. So let's go to the chametz that we're looking for, the ego. It's interesting because that was the theme yesterday. Rabbi Marcelo Bronstein led us yesterday and focused on that, thinking about the ego and the soul. So what are we looking for? Like I don't know, you were alluding it to a little bit like, you're the teacher, the guide, like I'll speak for myself, not for you. But like, there is that question about like, how am I doing? How is this going? How was that good? Was that helpful? Was that, how did that sound? Oh, I should have said this, right? I don't know. You're nodding, so I'm assuming maybe some of that goes on in your head too. Um,
When I'm leading a practice like this, that's one of the main things I'm working with. Just, yeah, that's very nice. Very nice. Come back to the object. Yeah, that's just like standard. Yeah, that's something I'm very used to, very familiar with. But it could be anything, right? That happens to be what's going on, in this particular moment, because we happen to be, doing this in this format. But if I'm meditating alone in the same chair and everything's the same, the conditions are the same, but I'm not, with a screen in front of me and people sharing the experience, then it could be anything that comes up, and the practice is the same, as you know. It's always just coming back to the object from a place of choice. It's really a practice of increasing our inner freedom, I find, actually, which is relevant to Pesach also, relevant to Chametz, and why one of the reasons we have to cleanse temporarily for 1 week from chametz is
Mhm.
there's something about freedom that requires starting again in the most simple way possible. With just the bare basic elements of life, which
Mhm.
for the ancient Israelites meant flour and water. I think that's what it's about. We start again from the basic, then you can add all the nice other things later. Once you kind of know how to appreciate that and work with that, then you fine, add your yeast, add your rising agent, and when you get to Shavuot, have a big bread party, as we do, which is great. But we have to get there with appreciation and consciousness of what that involves. And then once a year reset. I want to say one other thing about that process, which is our calendar wasn't made for easy times. We sometimes look at me, Rabbi Mark and I had a moment before checking in, before starting today's sit, where we just acknowledge we're both living in a lot of turmoil, but so did almost all of our ancestors and spiritual ancestors throughout history. Almost all of them were living with a great deal of instability and often trauma. And our calendars sometimes, somehow, not sometimes, but our calendars somehow help them be who they were through that and make amazing contributions through that. So I have a lot of faith in these cycles that our calendar takes us on to deepen in our practice.
That is, I think, very helpful for me and hope for others too, that reminder. So thank you. Thank you for that. I want to go back to that question about the ego. And I guess I'll just say like the right-sized ego, right? Which, or just the flour and water, the matzah. Like what, if we think about the baseline that we're trying to return to, right? Baseline, like I'm thinking about like an infant, a newborn, right? Doesn't really have an ego yet, right? It's not thinking about like, how am I doing here as a baby? Am I a good baby? Am I a bad baby, right? Um, it's just a pure, like a very pure kind of soul that's just living in sync, right? And we all have that within us, that capacity to get to that place, that kind of, I don't know if it's, egoless, but how would you describe it? I think within Jewish mysticism, there's a range, right? There is at one end of the spectrum, there is this idea of bitul, which, of kind of self-negation, where the goal really is to, like, I think, release the ego. And there's, at the other end, there's one that says, no, 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 the self is really a manifestation of the self of the universe, right? And we need to embrace ourself as so. How would you? What does it mean for you? Like how do you work with the ego? Like for me, like when you were noticing, like how am I doing? It's partly because I want to represent well, right? I want to be a vessel for the divine, and that's impossible because I'm a person. So like I could always there's some adjustment that's always called for. Um, and I can notice that I'm just like, oh, great job. That was wonderful. Or like, oh, why did you say that? Um, uh, so the ego can, that confliction can get puffed up like chametz, right? Whereas you said like chametz can mean like, no, the ego is not actually puffed up. It's extra deflated, low self-esteem. So what's the sweet spot? I guess is the question. Like, how would you describe that sweet spot of inhabiting the ego in relationship to the divine that helps us, feel like matzah. That's a matzah moment there.
I love this question. What comes up for me is actually related to what you said about the infant, the newborn. There's so many sources connecting our liberation from Egypt with a birth. Going back to very ancient ones, and then the mystics and the Hasidim drawing it a lot. And the Hasidim also talk a lot about being reborn again and starting again in every moment. And I think for me, that's the key, because if I can have a very strong practice of release and start again, release and start again, release and start again, then the ego can be there. Of course, all these different parts of all of us are there. Egotistical parts, hurt parts, stupid parts, destructive parts. We all have these parts in us. The Piazetza Rebbe famously says that if we were honest about what's going on in our heads, all of us would be locked in jail. Meaning like if we were judged on that basis, right? Because we all have terrible thoughts all the time. But we don't have to be attached to them. And what you
Mhm.
said about being a newborn for me is that practice of saying, I can start again.
Mhm.
Okay, so I had that thought, that feeling came up. Great, fine. I can choose to start again over and over and over again. The Hasidim speak about getting younger as we get older, and this is I think what they mean. I mean,
Mhm.
it seems pretty explicit from their teachings. They're saying, yeah, of course, like we all have this tumultuous cocktail going on all the time. It's sometimes so challenging, but it doesn't have to be us. We don't have to identify with it. So I can have all those thoughts, and then I can just choose to make a new beginning.
And I would associate that that's beautiful. And I associate what you said, that light of rachamim, of compassion, is really what's involved there. Like, because it said like, okay, I had that thought, or whatever, inflated thought or deflated thought, or um, that thought is over, and now this is a brand new moment, right? And it's as if I'm a brand new. And of course, we have a tradition that says like creation is being renewed on an ongoing basis. We're new creations at every moment, each breath. Wow. So we have to keep lifting that up. I think I have to really keep lifting that up. Thank you so much. All right. Well, I asked you beforehand, and you graciously said that, in fact, as you often do, or always do when I'm with you, have a rap that might be, those of you who don't know, Rabbi Daniel has an alter rap ego, Danny Raphael, which you can find online on social media for those who are in social media, and has a rap that syncs up with today's teaching and practice. So I will turn that to you. Thank you
Thanks
for that.
very much. Here we go. It's a short one today. There's a truth that divides and a truth that unites. Only you can decide which will move through your life. We must learn to discern, but far more important, we must learn to shut up and listen to the calling, constantly begging us, please pay attention. Our consciousness knows what we need every second, so let it. Let it inspire and guide, so let it. Let her invite us inside. She's lonely, and we are our only companions. Alone, we're so blind, but together we fathom the majesty spanning the infinite galaxies. I freely give over control of my faculties. I do not need it. I'm leaving my Egypt again and again. Every moment the sea splits. Nothing is worth losing you. Keep me from thinking so I can be true.
Thank you so much for that. Rabbi Daniel Raphael Silverstein, thank you so much. So sending love and strength from all of us to you, to your family, and to everyone in Israel. And grateful always to feel the connection there, and grateful always for your Torah, your wisdom, your music and presence. Daniel, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks to Rachel for holding our space, and to Karen Fried for sponsoring today to honor her mom's 90th birthday. Happy birthday, Yom Huladet Sameach, honey, and many more. And we hope to see everyone tomorrow to practice with Cantor Kareth Spencer Shapiro. Many blessings, everyone. Be safe and well.